In Crime and Punishment tonight, Steven Spielberg's real-life drama. The filmmaker is reportedly one of several famous Americans allegedly victimized in a $50 billion swindle, perhaps the largest fraud ever committed on Wall Street. And it's not just the famous who may have been fooled. A trusted financial giant is accused of scamming big money clients and charities into thinking they were getting rich, when in reality, investigators say he was stealing their money.
Bernard L. Madoff was the perpetrator of one of the largest fraudulent operations in history. His Ponzi scheme, which was shut down in 2008, cost investors, including A-listers such as Steven Spielberg, billions upon billions of dollars and ultimately devastated lives. However, in order to comprehend the sheer size of his operation, it is first necessary to understand what a Ponzi scheme actually is. The term Ponzi scheme derives from the man who first used the strategy, Charles Ponzi. Ponzi started out by buying postage stamps from Italy and then would have them shipped to the United States, where he would swap them for higher value U.S. stamps. He would then sell them for more than they were worth. This was not illegal, however, his next scheme was. Ponzi promised a few investors high returns on investments, up to 50% in just a few days. He would then use another investor's money to pay back someone else while pocketing the rest. Ponzi was able to keep up on the high returns, and word spread. More and more people heard about the high returns he promised and entrusted him with their money. Ultimately, Ponzi schemes depend on the expansion of the investor's reputation, so Ponzi targeted tight-knit groups. Everyone within this circle trusted one another, so they did not even check Ponzi's credentials or how he was able to follow through on such high returns. However, while Charles Ponzi actually thought it could be a legitimate business model, Madoff, like many, exploited the scheme for profit and personal gain, ruining the lives of thousands. Bernie Madoff was born on April 29, 1938, to parents Ralph and Sylvia Madoff. Oddly, during his childhood, he was not very interested in financials. He was more interested in his girlfriend, Ruth Alpern, who he would later go on to marry. Madoff attended the University of Alabama for a year, but then transferred to Hofstra University, where he earned a degree in political science. Later, he and his wife, Ruth Alpern, used money Madoff earned while lifeguarding and installing sprinkler systems to start up their own investment firm, Bernard L. Madoff Securities.
Madoff's firm began to rapidly expand in 1989. 3 large-scale investors in the Fairfield Greenwich Group, Ezra Merkin, and Sandra Mirsky, all began using Madoff's hedge fund. This increase in capital was essential for the corruption and a Ponzi scheme to work. This fraud began, according to Madoff, when he was tried in 2008 in 1990. However, it was largely unknown that this was the case. The NASD, or the National Association of Securities Dealers, investigated Madoff in 1990, but found no reason to shut down the firm. Much of the speculation that was present was due to the pure size of Madoff Securities. Throughout the 1990s, Madoff's firm was handling 9% of all transactions on the NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange. This got much of Wall Street up in arms. A 1993 article from the Washington Post described the NYSE's attitude towards Madoff as, "They speak of him with the blend of envy and admiration typically reserved for one who cleverly pockets millions while others lovingly watch." However, Madoff had a drastically different view of the situation. He simply saw it as him being ahead of the rest of the competition. This was evident when he stated in an interview, "I just don't see how anybody can make an argument against competition." Madoff's view expressed that of a believer in social Darwinism. He really did see himself as a lion fighting against cats. Moreover, at this time in 1993, Madoff was even the head of NASDAQ, meaning that he had much more control than most. Although this view that the Washington Post describes is a negative one, no one, at this point at least, decided to take legal action. The 1990s and early 2000s are when Madoff's operation began to initially deteriorate. Institutions surrounding Madoff began to fall apart, most notably the incident of Avellino and Bynes. In 1992, Avellino and Bynes was shut down by the SEC for running a Ponzi scheme after they found out that the firm was offering investors 20% returns. The two were directly related to Madoff. This is due to the fact that the firm, once they got clients, would send this money to Madoff for him to manage. Then Madoff would pay Avellino and Bynes part of the money he made as a way of rewarding them for getting him investments. In essence, Avellino and Bynes were funneling Madoff money. Avellino and Bynes was shut down, but Madoff somehow got away freely. In 2009, Michael Bynes was interviewed by Frontline PBS. He stated that Madoff was helping them make extra money, which was easy peasy, and that they thought they were special for being able to work for him. Bynes remembered being sued by a bank because a client went bankrupt, but never was he ever sued for something related to Madoff. In fact, Bynes stated that he himself never really looked into what was happening with the money they were giving to Madoff because he was the source of their income, so why would they?
What made you think that he could return 20%?
I don't know. How do I know? How do you split an atom? I know that you can split them. I don't know how you do it. How does an airplane fly? I don't ask.
Did you ask him?
Never.
An investigation did occur, but did not get very far. Avellino paid a fine to the SEC, and for the most part, the investigation was now over. When looking back on the incident, however, it appears that there may be more to the story regarding the SEC's failings to go after Madoff after they were done with Avellino and Bynes. The firm, which had $400 million in capital, kept no filings whatsoever. Moreover, the SEC also failed to use the fact that Avellino and Bynes offered their clients returns up to 20%, a figure which is frankly impossible, to trace the issues at the firm to Madoff himself, who was offering 10 to 12% returns. The SEC filings did not even list Madoff by name as being a reason for concern. Thus, they did not bother considering him as someone who was running a Ponzi scheme, even though he was closely related to Avellino and Bynes. Moreover, the lawyer the firm was using, Ira Sorkin, had been affiliated with Madoff for years, even more reason for alarm. The SEC continued to miss Madoff in the late 1990s. Henry Markopoulos was the first to publicly come out and expose Bernard L. Madoff. He did so as part of Rampart Investment Management. Markopoulos stated that if the returns that Madoff promised were actually happening, it would be equivalent to a baseball player hitting .925 straight for 10 years in a row. Would you bet on a player like that he wasn't doing something illegal? For comparison, the highest batting average ever recorded in a single season is .426. Following their investigation in 2000, Rampart Investment Management submitted an 8-page report to the SEC office in Boston. However, they were turned down and nothing came out of this, as the SEC simply put it to the side. Markopoulos' persistence would prove to be crucial in catching Madoff once and for all in the future. Meanwhile, speculation continued to grow regarding Madoff. In 2001, an article featuring an interview by Michael Ockrent was published, during which the billionaire was completely calm. Madoff demonstrated the opinion that he deserved respect from the financial world after being a trader for 40 years. He went on to put it very simply: the strategy is the strategy and the returns are the returns. Very soon, however, this strategy will become known to the public, and they will not be very happy.
In November 2005, Markopoulos submitted a complaint to the SEC which he titled "The World's Largest Hedge Fund is a Fraud." This was a 25-page document in which Markopoulos pointed out many red flags with the Madoff Securities Company. He realized that Madoff was throwing away potential profit by not charging hedge fund fees and instead charging undisclosed commissions, which seemed suspicious to him. He also realized that Madoff was the only New York hedge fund owner who was not constantly in the media and thought that the secrecy of the company was very suspicious, as other hedge fund moguls were in magazines and on TV, while Madoff kept his name off of all documents that dealt with managing money and was never in the media. Markopoulos' report prompted the SEC to launch an investigation, which they launched in January of 2006. This investigation started with an examination in May of that same year, where Madoff said that if the agents had looked at the stock reports, they could have discovered the scheme all the way back then, but instead they did not find out. The investigation continued with no gains when in 2008, Madoff told the SEC that he controlled $17 billion in assets and had 23 clients, a much smaller number than his actual holdings. As 2008 went on, the American economy was on the verge of collapse due to the housing and loan crisis. On September 15th, Lehman Brothers collapsed and the economic crisis began. Despite this crisis, Madoff's numbers stayed up, and people began to put even more money into the company. One of these people was notably Thierry de la Villehouche, a French aristocrat who was a founder of Access International Advisors. Villehouche and other investors put huge amounts of money into Madoff's hands during the financial crisis, continuing to be fooled by the Ponzi scheme and his high returns. In December of 2008, the SEC gave Madoff a court order to report his assets. He reported that he had $823 million in assets, including luxury homes in New York, France, Florida, and the Hamptons. He also reported that the ownership in his company was worth $700 million and his 4 yachts were worth over $10 million.
It was around this time that Madoff had obligations of about $7 billion that he was struggling to pay back. He was looking for ways to pay clients but could not find anything due to the financial crisis. He was running out of money very fast. He told his wife, Ruth, to make wire transfers so the family would have cash on hand. He then called his sons Andrew and Mark to his New York penthouse, where he finally confessed the Ponzi scheme to them. It was around this time that Thierry de la Villehouche also committed suicide after realizing that he had lost billions in the Madoff scheme. Bernie Madoff was arrested by the FBI on December 10, 2008, and was confined to house arrest with 24-hour guard in New York.
Wall Street legend Bernard Madoff has clients panic that their wealth may be gone.
It's hard to believe that somebody so successful, who people trusted for years, was so greedy and so corrupt to steal their money.
Madoff pleaded guilty to his 11 charges in March 2009. He confessed his scheme here to the world, saying, quote, "The essence of my scheme was that I represented to clients and prospective clients who wished to open investment advisory and investment trading accounts with me that I would invest their money in shares of common stock options, and other securities of large well-known corporations, and upon request would return to them their profits and principal. For many years, up until I was arrested, I never invested those funds in the securities as I had promised. Instead, those funds were deposited in a bank account at Chase Manhattan Bank. When clients wished to receive the profits they believed they had earned with me or to redeem their principal, I used the money in the Chase Manhattan bank account that had belonged to them or other clients to pay their requested funds."
This is a CBS News special report. Good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Couric here in New York, where Bernard Madoff has just been sentenced for the biggest investment fraud in Wall Street history.
June 29, 2009 was the day where Judge Denny Chin sentenced Bernie Madoff to 150 years in prison on 11 charges, included securities fraud, investment advisor fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and much more. Judge Chin called his crimes extraordinarily evil during his sentencing. The impact of the Madoff scandal was far-reaching, with many high-profile investors losing small fortunes to the Ponzi scheme. Some of Madoff's largest investors included award-winning director Steven Spielberg, the Wilpon family, who were the former owners of the New York Mets and Yeshiva University in New York City. The government also worked extremely hard to ensure there wouldn't be another Madoff situation. The Dodd-Frank Act and other SEC reforms put new regulations on reporting and monitoring for hedge funds. As well, they appointed a man named Irving Picard to liquidate Madoff's assets and to pay investors. He was able to recover $9 billion through many lawsuits and asked for $19 billion from JP Morgan, claiming that they were at the very center of the fraud, as they had taken $500 million in fees from the account and had withdrawn $250 million from the account in 2008. Forbes reported that in 2013, only $5.4 billion of the $9 billion had been paid back. In addition to the huge losses of money, 15 of Madoff's inner circle had charges filed against them. One other terrible story to come from the Madoff scandal was the suicide of Madoff's son, Mark, in 2010. Mark Madoff was just 46 years old when he was found dead in his Soho apartment in late 2010. His lawyer claimed that he had, quote, "succumbed to 2 years of unrelenting pressure from false accusations and innuendo," unquote. The suicide showed that the effects were still being felt 2 years after. In 2017, almost 9 years after the Ponzi scheme was discovered, Bernie Madoff is known in America as the greatest con artist of all time. He was able to use the trust he gained over years in the financial industry to fool high-profile people from across the globe into pouring billions into a fund that promised almost impossible returns. No matter which way anyone looks at it, Madoff forever changed the way people will look at financial fraud.